one or two rejections here and there. And I just thought, you know what, because this is front of mind, it would be good for me to go through um, tips and tricks on how to deal with these rejections that I'm getting. And it would be even better to share the um, with the church, or with men specifically. Not men specifically, but as a man to the church. Um, so I'm not going to talk for very long. I'm not much of a talker, so I won't keep you here for no longer than 10, 15 minutes max. So I don't know what plans you have, but if you have plans, you can rest assured I won't keep you here for too long. So to begin, I'm just gonna have a quick definition of rejection. Um, it is defined as a dismissing or the refusal of a proposal or idea, or even more than that. Um, there are various types of rejections, as we may or may not know. Um, Obviously, there's romantic rejection, there's social rejection, which is the rejection from or by friends or family, or friends specifically. It could be um, it could be direct. Sometimes it may even be indirect, in that you may feel rejected by your friends because you're not invited in a way that you'd like to be invited to a lunch or whatever the case may be. Um, there's also rejection by family. This may be abandonment or just a lack of love from family members. Um, what I found out is that the pain of rejection, the pain we feel from rejection, is neurologically similar to that of physical pain. The parts in the brain responsible for both are quite close to each other. And so it's not um, it's not so hard to believe why rejection can feel as painful as it does. Also, rejection is quite inevitable. Um, and it's important for us to develop a um, healthy coping mechanism when it comes to rejection. It's quite a valuable life skill, because there is a danger that a lot of people may face in that you feel that, okay, if I just lower my expectations, maybe the rejection might not feel as heavy. But that might not be as healthy as you think it is. Also, the pain you feel in rejection does not mean you are weak. It is perfectly normal to feel that pain. It is perfectly human to feel that pain. And it does not invalidate you in any way, shape, or form. Um, One of the main reasons that rejection affects us so greatly, um, is because we are social creatures as human beings. As is said in Genesis, man shall not live alone. It is not good for man to be alone, sorry. Um, Even though this was specifically said to Adam in relation to having a wife. And it's often used in that atmosphere, so to speak, as in like it's not good for a man to not have a wife. Sorry. Um, I think it also extends to the fact that as human beings, it's quite important for us to have a social safety net around us. And so whenever that social safety net is broken in any way, it hurts us at quite a deep and inherent level. Um, so when we're rejected, um, regardless of the type of rejection, I find ourselves going through the stages of grief. First being denial. Um, you may be in disbelief at the rejection, especially when it comes to romantic rejection. It might be thinking that no, this can't be right. This can't be true. Um, my wingman who told me to go for her said it's a good idea. Um, or you might be rejected in terms of a job, and you might be thinking that no, I was promised the job. They told me it's a good idea. You know, and so once you have pushed past that denial stage, you get into anger. You might feel anger towards the person who rejected you, anger towards the people who may have pushed you towards that situation. You may even have anger towards yourself. Um, and it's very important to resist the urge to express that anger, if it makes sense. Um, I was reading up and it was encouraged that there are certain I don't know if you may or not know this. There's this company or there's this company that you can go to in which you go and smash things and break things in order to express your anger or to express your frustration. And I read that that is never a healthy way of dealing with your anger. It simply spurs it on and it simply encourages it. Um, and so oftentimes when you have this anger, it is more often than not a secondary emotion. So it's quite important to take a step back, take a few deep breaths, and think to yourself where exactly this anger is coming from, um, and what exactly I need to deal with specifically. Yes, it might be the rejection, but why does this rejection in particular anger me? Um, Following then, you have bargaining. This is where you start to beg and plead. Oftentimes, more often than not, you beg and plead to yourself, or you might beg and plead to the person in question, or you might be tempted to do so. Um, I would advise not to. It is quite important to give space when rejected. Um, while there might be a good enough time to go back and be like, okay, maybe I can try again. Maybe I can reapply to that job. Maybe I can, try again and volunteer for that program where they rejected me. Maybe I can reapply to that school where they rejected me. But there should be a healthy time between your rejection and when you try again, because oftentimes that try again might not be you at your best self. Following that, we have depression. This is where you find yourself questioning your own self-worth. Um, the unfortunate thing about rejection is that it may make you feel as though you are not worthy of whatever it is you're rejected from. And while I cannot give you that reassurance specifically because I don't know your situation, it is important to remember that you as a human being have inherent worth. Um, and even if someone else may not see that, it is important for you yourself to realize that. And finally, we have acceptance. This is where you finally start to sink in. The rejection finally starts to sink in. And this is the point at which you can now start to healthily grow from it and, you know, gain whatever lessons that we need to gain. So it is very easy to find yourself not living life to the fullest in an effort to avoid rejection. You might find that you don't apply for a job. You might find that you don't apply for a specific school. You don't put yourself out there romantically. As a man, you might not approach a woman because you feel that, she might reject me or she's out of my league, so to speak. Um, what I cannot tell you um, not to take that leap in life. I can't outright advise you that you must go for that girl because I don't, like I said, I don't know your situation. But what I can say is that God has a wonderful life in store for you, and that life cannot be lived if you are stuck in your comfort zone. Um, so just to get a bit practical, I have a few tips and a few advices on how to deal with rejection. Um, First and foremost, I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form. I just did a little bit of research and a bit of reading. Um, so I'm just going to share what I found. And obviously, if there's a lot more out there, if you still want more, just hit me up and I'll send you what I found, send you some of the articles that I found. Um, One of the tips is acceptance. You cannot cope with rejection if you deny it, or if you deny the pain that it's causing rather. Um, excuse me. I know that we may often be in danger of claiming that it doesn't matter, or just, shrugging it off. Speaking especially to the men have a tendency of, trying to, just be like, yeah, I'm a man. This doesn't affect me. Let me just, push through. Um, but it's important for you to take a step back and just accept that it happened to you, and not just brush it off. Um, we need to work towards understanding your feelings, um, and the feelings that you felt when you were rejected, and not lash out, or not lash out at the wrong person. Um, Oftentimes when you're rejected, there's this uh, there's this danger, as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to anger, to, you know, have the incorrect, or a harsh reaction, so to speak, towards the people around you, or even the people who rejected you. But like I said, it's important to process your feelings and think about, um, the rejection, and think about your feelings specifically, and make sure that in any action that you're about to take, you think through it twice, thrice, even four times. Um, it's important to have compassion on yourself. Um, Rejection can have quite a heavy toll on your physical health, and by extension, your mental health. So it's very important to have mercy on yourself. Um, as people, we tend to be very harsh, or sometimes, let me not speak for you, I tend to be very harsh towards myself, and I'm sure that there may be others who think the same way. It's important to, like I say, have compassion, have comfort towards yourself. If in the same way, if a friend came to you and told you they were rejected, you would have comfort and compassion towards that person. You will not be like, "Ugh, of course you got rejected. You're you." Um, it's important for you to have the same care that you would have, um, to care for yourself the same way you would care, if a friend came to you and told you they're rejected. Um, do not allow, sorry, just give me a sec. Do not allow the rejection to define you. A friend of mine once had a saying that you cannot be everyone's cup of tea. Some people like coffee. And I think, especially when it comes to romantic rejections, we tend to sort of retreat within ourselves and start thinking, okay, was it something I did? Um, is there something that I need to improve about myself? No, but like, this person said I'm a great guy. This person said I'm nice. Why then would she reject me? Or when it comes to a job, in the interview, you might be like, oh, in the interview, they were singing my praises, and they told me I had such a great CV, etc., etc., etc. But why is it that I didn't get the job? Is it something I said? And it's very important for you not to dwell in the rejection itself, not to even brand yourself as a rejected person, but rather gain whatever lessons. It bleeds on to the next step I have, in that it's very important for you to sit down and try and extract lessons from the rejection where possible. Um, Sometimes, of course, it's not easy to do this, to yourself. Obviously, if you got rejected, it's very difficult rather to know where it was that your fault lies. And so it's by extension, it's important to have honest people around you, honest people with whom can give you a evaluation. Um, so when it comes to jobs, I know that there are a lot of there are people who may be in a particular field who can look through your CV and say, okay, work on this, and this. Maybe it'll help you. Or there are people who can give you tips on your interview and say, okay, um, I know you usually are this type of person, so work on this aspect about yourself. And also, it's important to get professional help where necessary when it comes to learning about yourself and learning which aspects to improve on yourself in order to avoid that rejection once again. Um, Furthermore, you should have a healthy practice of self-care. Um, I know that self-care might go into a slippery slope of, a bit of mysticism and a bit of the yoga aspect of meditation. But there is healthy self-care in terms of sometimes all you need is a walk or going out in nature. I read somewhere that sometimes even just looking at a beautiful view might have quite a positive impact on your mental health, especially um, coming out of rejection. Um, Also, specifically when it comes to romantic rejection or even just romantic hurt in general, it is important to avoid jumping from one romantic encounter to the next in order to numb the pain. And in as much as it may help for for the immediate, in the long run, in the long term, it might have a detrimental effect on you as a person. It might have a detrimental effect on how your romantic relationships can move in the future. And then, last but not least, it's quite important to avoid what's known as uh, re remuneration. Remuneration. It's important to avoid beating yourself up when it comes to rejection. As I mentioned earlier, um, as human beings, we have a tendency of being negative um, towards ourselves, especially after a negative encounter, but after a negative experience. And so it's important for you to avoid steeping yourself in that negativity, especially coming from a rejection. And then I also just want to focus on a biblical response, a biblical response to rejection. Um, just looking at how Christ was rejected in his time, just a few points, a few stories, and how then, and what lessons we can extract. And just also want to leave you um, with a few verses that we can just hold on to if ever we find ourselves with being rejected and having to deal with that difficulty. So I'd just like to take the time to read from Mark 6, Mark 6, verse 1 to 6. It reads as follows. And he went out from thence and came into his own country, and his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath day was come, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many hearing him were astonished, saying, From whence has this man these things? And what wisdom is this which he has given unto him, that even such mighty works are wrought by his hands? Is that not the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, and Joseph, and Judah, and Sam, and Simon? And are his not sisters with us? And they were offended by him. And Jesus said unto them, A prophet is not without honor, but in his own country, and among his own kin, and in his own house. And he could do there no mighty work, save that he laid a few hands on a few sick folk and healed them. And he marveled at their unbelief, and went around from other villages teaching. I'll also read from Luke 9, verse 51 and 256. Reading from verse 51. And it came to pass, when the time was come that he should not be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem, and sent messengers before his face. And they went and entered into a village of Samaria to make ready for him. And when they did not receive him, because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. And when the disciples, Jesus and John, saw this, they said, Lord, would thou not command fire to come down from heaven and consume them as Elias did? And he turned and rebuked them and said, You know not the manner of spirit which you are of. For the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And then he went to another village. So there are, of course, many stories in the life of Jesus where we can see rejection, but I just wanted to highlight these two specifically. So the first is when Jesus was beginning his ministry. He began it in this specific case, he was in Nazareth, his home. And the very people he grew up with were the very first to reject him. They even mentioned his entire family. Like, isn't that Jesus? Didn't we see him the other day? Wasn't that the carpenter? And it just shows that it is very possible that even people within our very home, within our very circle, are capable of rejecting us. But one thing that Jesus did is that he went, he continued with his ministry, he continued pushing forward, and he simply went to another village. A similar situation is seen, as I read just now in Luke 9, in which the Samaritans rejected housing Jesus. And even when James and John were asking, for the people to be smited, Jesus rebuked them, and instead of seeking vengeance on these people, he simply moved on. And so we see that Jesus' trust in God allowed him to see beyond the rejection and push forward. So before I close, I'm just going to read a few verses just for us to have verses in our pockets if we ever find ourselves in a situation of rejection. So I'm just going to read them, read verse by verse and point by point. From Ephesians 2, verse 13. But now Jesus Christ, ye who sometimes are far off, are made nigh of the blood of Christ. This is a reminder that regardless of how much it may feel contrary, God is always near. And then we'll go to 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. It reads as follows, And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. It's a reminder that God's grace is more than enough for us, even though we may be wallowing and in pain and feeling weakness. It is a reminder that even in our weakness, God is still strong. I'll read Isaiah 49, verse 15. Verse 15. Can a woman forget her suckling child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may not forget, yet I will not forget thee. I'll also read Psalms 27, verse 10. When my father and mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. This is a reminder that even when your family and the people you may consider closest to you may forsake you or may abandon you, God will not forget you. I'll also read from Philippians 4:19. Verse 19 said, But my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches in glory in Jesus Christ. a reminder that God will meet your needs. I will lastly read from 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. There hath no temptation taken you, but such is common to man. And God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able, but with the temptation also will make a way to escape, that ye may not be able to bear it. Now, of course, this verse specifically talks about temptation, but I like to think it also extends to the pain you may feel from rejection, in that God would never allow you to be in a situation beyond that which He believes you are capable. And so He will always make a way for us to move through or to push through or to move beyond the rejection we may be feeling. So in closing, I just want to mention this. As I said before, you as a person have inherent value. God took the time not only to create you, but He took the time to care for you. In Matthew 10, verse 29 to 31, it mentions how the hairs on your head are numbered. To put that into perspective, the human head is about 110,000 strands. And so the fact that God is able to think about every single one of those strands means that even the very minute aspect of yourself, something you may not think is worthy or valuable, something you might not think is worth your time, God does, and God sees you and sees your pain and is there for you and is there as a comfort. So remember that regardless of the pain you feel from rejection, your Father in heaven cares for you, values you, and is your comfort. I will close in prayer. Father God in heaven, I thank you once again for your message. I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for the privilege of prayer. Father in heaven, I pray for the message that we have received. I pray that you may comfort those who may be feeling rejected at this time, that the lessons and the verses that I have imparted may be of worth. And I pray for the Sabbath as a whole, Lord. I pray for their programs tomorrow, that they may run smoothly and that at the end of the day, your name may be praised. Yes, I pray, Lord, in the name of Jesus Christ. So I'm done on my end, and I think I can open up for any questions or any comments about what I said. Again, if there's anything that I've mentioned that you'd want clarity on, or any resource that you'd want me to share, I'm more than willing to share. I'm more than willing to share the verses. But yes, I'll hand over to Eric if there's no other questions. But yes, if anyone has any questions, this would be the time to speak. You can just unmute yourself and speak, or speak through the chat.
Thank you, Maro. It was a good presentation. I thought I should say something with regards to how I look at the whole question of rejection. I was just thinking that if you had to really think about it, you actually realize that most of the things that we often feel rejected concerning, we actually don't have control over. For instance, you go for a job interview, you have no control over whether or not you're given the job. Despite your qualifications, your experience, or who you may be, you actually have no control over it. You may approach a girl that you like, you don't have control whether or not she's going to accept your proposal. So you'd find that if you really take a good look at most of the aspects that we may feel rejected about, we actually do not have control over them. So which therefore means if we fail to understand that, that's when we may take rejection as something is personal, or something that can be painful, so to speak.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Adolf.
So I was just thinking that just try and understand that that is the case in life. That is the case in life, number one. And number two, to understand also that people generally have choices to make. And the fact that we have choices to make, it means that there are options. So we all make choices. And if I make a choice, it means that there's an option that I went for and there's an option that I did not go for. So if I go for option B rather than for option A, it may also not be something that has to do with option B, but it's just that at that time, option A was the best or option B was the best. So sometimes it may not necessarily be about you. The fact that you went for a job interview, but they chose person B instead of you, it may not be something that has to do with you. It's just that at that point in time, it was worth that they get person B at the end of the day. I've sat in many interviews at work, and there are sometimes where you realize that you end up having to opt for someone that you would not necessarily have opted for if you were to consider the qualifications and the experience. But there's just maybe one thing that the company needs at most at that point in time. And then later on, you then realize as a company that now we need that person. And then you look for someone with those qualities. So there are several things that play here. So my encouragement to people is that let's not take rejection personal, because it may not be necessarily about you, number one. And number two, we don't have control over the decisions that other people make. And then number three, also to understand that we ourselves also make choices, and to bear in mind that when we make choices, it means that we are actually rejecting one option against another option, or we are rejecting one person in favor of another person. So if we look at rejection holistically like this, I think it will help us not to feel bad about it, but to find it in our hearts, the strength and the courage to just understand that at the end of the day, life still goes on. It has nothing to do with me. I think I just have to continue with life, or maybe upskill or better my life in the near future, so that I may be chosen, I may be selected for whatever reason. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Adolf. Does anyone else have a comment, question, concern?
Good evening.
Good evening, Adolf.
I just want to make mention that when it comes sometimes as well to rejection, I think what is also key, it's not more from what is coming from the outside, from what people might say about you as an individual, but what's worse is what you say to yourself. For me, I think that is a key aspect where, because you can avoid getting to maybe a point where depression, whether it was because of rejection, because of what it is that you say to yourself, because that is key. But if you have words that you can claim from the word of God to know that you are wonderfully created, and you are created in the image of God, regardless of whatever it is that you hear from the outside, I think that is key. And further to this, I'm reminded of Jesus was asking his disciples, "Who do they say I am?" There were different scenarios and so forth. So people will have their own point of view, and at the end of the day, they're entitled to say whatever it is that they want to. But interestingly enough, Jesus wanted to know, what is it who do you say I am? And of course, there was an inspired response that came through the Holy Spirit. So at the end of the day, it's about us, what we think of Christ, who he is to us. And ultimately, when we know who he is to us, nothing else will get us down, knowing that we can always hold on, knowing that, he's with us. Claim he's never going to leave me nor forsake me. So I don't think anything will bring you down if at all our mindset as well is inclined to claim that we are wonderfully created. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything else to add? Any questions, comments, concerns?
Sorry, I'm back again. Also, I was just thinking, there's something that you mentioned about our inherent worth. It's something that is worth remembering each time, that the fact that you are rejected by someone or by a company does not or will never, ever, ever diminish who you are, your worth at the end of the day. So if you are to remember that, I think it would help you understand that at the end of the day, you still remain who you are. Nothing is taken away from you, and you still remain the person that you were prior to the rejection. So if anything at all, if there's someone that would have lost, is the person that have rejected you, because they would have lost the worth that you were going to bring into that company or into that person's life, something that they will never understand or get to know what it is that they would have benefited from. So I think that's just how we can also look at it and also try and make sure that we don't feel bad about it, if we remember that we ourselves are worth a lot, especially in front of God.
Definitely. Does anyone have anything else to add? In the absence of any point, Eric, just to close off and just to discuss if there's any other announcements, I think I'll just hand over to you, Brother Eric.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mwelwa. Am I audible to everybody? I'm not sure.
Yes, you're audible.
Yes. Yeah, Mwelwa, thank you so much for this. It's a well-rounded presentation. I really benefited a lot out of this. You have touched on a subject that is relevant, and it touches on everybody. And like you said, no one is immune to rejection. All of us can go through processes of rejection, but then of course it's up to us to, like Elder Banda said, that it's wholly on us to, on what you say to yourself. It's not dependent on any external factors to go through it properly. This subject of rejection, it's a deep thing. It's a deep thing because it's a relational issue. It touches also on our ego, because nobody wants to be rejected, even though we ourselves do reject, And when we look at it, Christ himself being our example, okay, he felt rejected also when he was going through the process of our salvation, And I remember when he was there by Gethsemane, when he felt this gulf between himself and the Father, feeling rejected. It was difficult for him to the extent that, he needed an angel. An angel had to be sent by God to comfort him, And this is what we all need. We really need the Holy Spirit. And when he left, he says, I'm going to leave you a comforter. He knew that we were going to go a lot through processes of rejection. And again, there is an extent where when we can't handle rejection itself, when we try to look into our own ways of trying to comfort ourselves and we fail, we have seen detrimental results through that. People get to some of them to kill themselves. They end their lives when they are rejected. And we've seen people even leaving church, because they feel I've been rejected by so and so. I mean, the whole thing becomes a whole ripple effect, really. And you really see that mostly it will be upon this issue of rejection. My prayer and my hope is that as we have learned, we don't have to be so hard about ourselves. We have to let the process of going through rejection take its part. When you are going to go through the processes like anger and whatever, you don't have to look at yourself and think you are a coward. Go through the pain, go through everything, and let us invite the comforter whom we have been entrusted by the Lord. So he knows us better than anybody else. Okay? And if we let him to talk to us when we are rejected and when we feel we can't go any far with the rejection, I'm sure that he will be able to take us by our hands and take us through the processes, and we'll be fine again, to the extent that we can even forget that we even went through the processes of rejection. Thank you so much for this. We can count on you, Mwelwa. I personally can, because I know that you're always willing to be used of God, and that we have so many other programs up ahead of us, and I know that you can always be there to stand up to be counted and work for the Lord. Thank you so much, and everybody else who attended. This your contribution were great. We have all been blessed. So enjoy the rest of the Sabbath. Happy Sabbath to you. Enjoy the rest of the Sabbath and all the programs that are coming up. Good night, and see you all tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.